Yep. However you want to do it.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm Salvador Cordova, and I'm joined by Bobby Gilstrap. And I'm finding that this channel is starting to kind of find its purpose. We get a lot of Christian graduate students and professors. This is a very academic channel, if you haven't noticed already, but Christian academics are like everyone else, and we have needs. So, we go to church and we have to study the Bible, and we have to talk about all sorts of things outside of our academic specialties. So a quick greetings to Fran Marie and to Patrick Alexander. So I think the interesting thing is, how did we get to meet each other? How did you find me, Bobby? And you started reaching out to me. And I take it that what you do professionally was related to your interest in what I had to say, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, half and half. First, thanks for having me. And even though I've never worked in Chick-fil-A, it's my pleasure to join you. I appreciate the conversation. And you and I have had some conversations. You've been on my channel several times with talking about apologetics, talking about situation at McLean Bible Church, some of those things. And that really was what initially was the source that connected me with you. I don't remember exactly, but the best I remember, I was just doing some searches, having heard some things through formal or informal rumor mills about some things that were happening at McLean Bible. Having known David Platt for a long time, not personally. I walk in the room, he doesn't know who I am, but many of the same people he's worked with in the denominational level, that kind of thing, are all people I've worked with. So we have a lot of mutual people. Of course, I've known of him for a long time because of the radical materials and some other things of that sort, and heard him speak, that kind of thing. But anyway, I had heard something. And so I was just doing some searches, and like many Americans and probably around the world, find that YouTube oftentimes renders some better results than just searching on the internet sometimes. And just happened on your channel one night, and you had done something about McLean. And just out of curiosity, I clicked on it. I was sitting right where I am right now, here at my desk and working on some things. And so I was going to just kind of have it running in the background, with a kind of TV going and be listening, multitasking, I guess, and just started listening and ended up staying through. It was over 2 hours, and you had several people with you. And so I stayed with the whole thing,
Wow.
And you guys, got off on other things from time to time. I just stayed with it. So then I picked up on a couple of others and, kind of watched them as well. I am educated, but educated much differently than you are. So,
well, if I may share with the viewers, Bobby and his friends, and I think their names are public, Jim Burr and Bert Spann, they're pastors. When I got threatened with arrest in jail at McLean, I've been, strangely, I think I'm still a member in good standing because the leadership is in the middle of a legal dispute.
And if you join another church, they want to be able to send a letter. They don't want to keep you. So,
yeah. But if they terminated me now, it would just look really bad because that's my guess that's the reason I'm being held on.
Sure.
But they don't want me on the campus. But the point is, the three of you, I can't tell you how much it meant that you'd be calling, texting me, and lending your support and prayers, because it can be, if this were back in the old days where there's not so much mobility, if you're out of the local church, you're just gone.
Right.
Unless, if you're in a sparsely populated area, that would have been it. But the Lord has provided brothers and sisters outside of McLean Bible that I don't feel at all disfellowship from the body of Christ at large. and kind of in an odd sort of way, in terms of the conservative Christians, they've sort of disfellowshipped David Platt for all that's going on there, and it's just a mess. So I began to read a little bit about what you do, and I could see how there's probably why what was happening to me was of interest to you. And then I began to I had to spool up a lot on what happens behind the scenes in churches, and some of it's really ugly. I'm sorry to say. I still, so I'll let you describe what you do, but I realize you've been in contact with so many churches. Maybe probably did a lot of case studies on dysfunctional churches and functional churches. And so why don't you tell the audience what? And my understanding is you've been a pastor also. So
Yeah,
I've had you've given me some pastoral counseling during this time, because certainly the leaders of church don't give me any pastoral counseling at this point.
Well,
Just threatening
I am
letters
sorry
and just
about that. Yeah.
maligning my name in their emails to the congregation. I don't get any, but please share.
And some of what we've discussed, just you and I, and even with the pastors group, and we've done that, some of that dynamic has to do with the size of the church. Communication, the management of the church, getting the bills paid are all significantly different if you're in a much larger church. Even the difference in a church that runs 1,000, a church that runs 3,000 or 4,000, that mega church. So I've worked with all size churches. And although I have spoken extensively in lots of places and to churches of all sizes, that kind of thing, most of my work really has been face-to-face, boots on the ground, sitting with a pastor, sitting with leadership, working through conflicts, contentious church meetings at times. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that have happened. And then also in celebrating. Why don't I go back just real quick and trace the journey, just so you kind of have an idea. When I first went to college, I actually have 4 degrees from 4 Baptist institutions. So, wow. And so I started off with a 2-year degree from Bruton Parker College, which is in South Georgia. Transferred to Oklahoma Baptist, got a bachelor's degree there in sociology and psychology. Went to Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth, got a master's degree there in a master's of divinity. And then eventually, after we actually moved to Michigan, I went ahead and got a doctorate degree. Doctor of Divinity in that from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary there in Kansas City, Missouri. So, you know, my background, like I said, I'm educated, and most of that is of little use when it comes to what you've learned in the field, you know, actually walking with people and talking with people. Seminary doesn't do a real good job for sure doing that along the way, but it helps. So, my journey started back when I was at that Bruton Parker College, and I became the president of what was called the Baptist Student Union, which is a collegiate on-campus group. And I went as a summer missionary after my freshman year. And I ended up in Michigan, of all places, where I ended up serving as a career missionary. And so I served there all summer long, working with a team. And so we worked there, came back, ended up serving in a church in 82. And I served as a summer youth minister, and then began preaching lots of different places and revivals, that kind of thing. And eventually continued serving in churches. So ended up moving to Oklahoma to go to school, and preached and served several churches there, ended up going to seminary, served churches there. So everywhere I've been, basically, I had done that. But until seminary, I was always in youth ministry. So I was working with all the things, you know, build the world's largest, root beer float or something, you know, a banana split or whatever it is, you know. But one important thing I learned when I was doing youth ministry that really is true today, and I try to tell folks even now, is that, you keep them with what you hook them with. You keep them with what you hook them with. And in youth ministry, that's easily lost because you think it's all about the fun and games, and, well, you know, kids won't come and whatever. But the reality is, if it's all just about fun and games, they're not going to keep fun and games. You've got to keep up in your game as such. So there's got to be a good balance between working with the parents and working with your youth workers, and then good quality teaching, helping them learn something that they put to practice when they go back to the classroom, when they get on campus, when they're playing on that ball team or whatever it is. And they'll come back for that because that's making a difference. That's transformative type stuff at that point, and not just the entertainment. So,
what was the saying again? You
well, you keep them with what you hook them with. Yeah, you
okay,
keep them with what you hook them with.
What you hook.
Yeah, I'm slanging it a little bit for Texas, Oklahoma, I guess. Keep with what you hook with. But
no, you've actually given me a pearl of wisdom here, because I'm in the process of forming this channel and the subscriber base.
Mm-hmm.
And if I keep jumping around too much, I'm going to lose subscribers. So I have to kind of be careful about what I hook them with, in other words.
Exactly.
So,
well, and that all of the studies that I've seen, even in the last year, from YouTube, people who study YouTube and successful channels, all that kind of thing, that's exactly what they say. The channels that just continually just pop around, well, I want to do this, and they're doing all kinds of things. Typically, they don't succeed as well as somebody who focuses in, knows who their channel is for, and if they want to do like a weekly vlog, of their life, but they also want to do something that is very specific, they usually suggest start 2 different channels, and focus on exactly what you want to focus on for each. But anyway, that's something that still applies now, in churches. And then I ended up becoming a pastor when I was in seminary. And once I graduated seminary, I was pastoring in Oklahoma. And we continued in Oklahoma. We were there another 9 years. And then we were appointed by the North American Mission Board to go to Michigan to serve as missionaries, where one of my primary focuses was church planting. And then I worked with church revitalization, that kind of thing, church health with churches. And so the existing churches that were there, I worked developing resources, training materials, providing, event type things that would help them, individual consultation, and a wide variety of things, because we were very small staff, didn't have the number of churches, that kind of thing, that could really have the large resources. But we partnered with North American Mission Board, and so that was my first service with the North American Mission Board, other than having just been aware of what they did for years. And so we ended up being there for a total of 16 years. Toward the end, I was an associational missionary in Michigan for a decade, and then became the executive director for the state convention there in Michigan, and stayed there when all the big transitions started happening at the North American Mission Board. Yep.
I just got to ask you.
Sure.
So you're the director of the state level North American Mission Board?
Well,
is that what they call it?
Well, it's a little different. There are 42 what are called state conventions. And so the hierarchy for Baptists, particularly Southern Baptists, most people understand as denominations like Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopal. It's a top-down, kind of hierarchy. And so whoever's at the top, like I'm thinking, people I've served with, Methodist church, well, then somebody somewhere else tells that church, okay, we're going to take your pastor and move him, or we're going to put a new pastor in there, or whatever. They're in control of that. And that local church just kind of gets what they get at that point. And so they don't have what's called congregational control as that point. But Southern Baptists are very opposite of that. We're very autonomous, and our hierarchy works basically from the bottom up. It's the local churches, which among Southern Baptists, there are almost 50,000, or right at 50,000 local churches. So it's the local church. And then we're subdivided into, or grouped into, what would be called associations. And those are different depending on where you are, how many churches there are across the country. But there's no denominational group that says you have to have you have to have an association of this many people. Okay.
Okay.
So as churches get together, it's a natural thing for believers to want a fellowship, right? And if you're in ministry or you're in a church, it's a natural thing to say, I've never done this before. I wonder if somebody else around here has, and want to get feedback and want to get some training, that kind of thing. So associations have formed over the years, around different geographical areas, and churches would join. They'd just, hey, I want to be a part of that association. So there were aspects of fellowship that were there. They would join together to help provide training, that kind of thing. I guess the easiest way to start describing Southern Baptists when you move away from the local church is at the association, state convention, and national entity level. We're able to do together what we can't do separately.
Right.
So go ahead.
I'll tell you why I was asking.
Mm-hmm.
So your title again was at Michigan?
Executive director. Yeah, I was executive director.
Of the Michigan?
Of the Baptist State Convention of Michigan is what it was called.
Baptist State
Convention of Michigan.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry to bring this up, but I'm interested now. Will McCraney, what was he?
He was the executive director for the Baptist Convention of Maryland, Delaware. It was named different, but same thing.
Now let me explain for the uninitiated or the viewers.
Sure.
Will McCraney is filing a $15 million lawsuit against the North American Mission Board.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. There's no dollar amount on it, but it is a lawsuit. There's no number been attributed to it.
Oh, well, thank you for correcting me.
Yeah. Even the North American Mission Board released a post. It's on their website still, but it said that he had demanded $7 million, but he's never done that either. So, and I'm not sure why they felt that, but yeah, that will all be determined by the court ultimately. So once it gets to that stage, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just kind of you're helping me understand what's going on here.
Sure.
And just this case has gone, or a related case or something, it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
That's
and
correct.
There's been a lot of stuff. One, obviously, people on the side of Will McCraney are saying some things. I'm not going to be the judge of who's right or wrong, but I will say that their side has claimed that the North American Mission Board and gang had lied to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's going to be, I don't know the state of the trial, but I hear that the North American Mission Board may not really like having, Will McCraney wants to have disclosure of the finances of the North American Mission Board. And obviously there's pushback to that. And this will relate also to kind of your field of specialty when you get not just very large churches, but when you have large organizations. Exactly. And I was just reading something here. There was a book called Spending God's Money.
Right. Yeah. It was written by a former, well, let me say this, the abbreviation everybody uses is NAMB, N-A-M-B, N-A-M-B for North American Mission Board. Yeah. So, but rarely it's kind of like the B is silent, but people refer to it as NAM. So yeah, forgive me if I just say NAM, but
just like Vietnam. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sort of that. Yeah, that's kind of right. But yes, and I don't remember the lady's name. If you have the book, you might know. But she was a former employee. Yeah, she was a former employee of the North American Mission Board.
Mary Kinney Branson.
But
let me just for the reader's sake, and this is from an article in Baptist News. All right, so this is publicly claimed stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to read a paragraph here. Let me just show it from for the sake of the viewers. And this will just set the stage for my interest in our conversation tonight, because I've actually been horrified with what I've been seeing, and I'm needing a little bit of also spiritual counsel, because this has been a little bit of a shock to me, and how to deal with this, because it has shaken me up as far as what I have believed about the church in the United States. Right. But it says here, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona. The Baptist Foundation of Arizona was established with the pretense of serving Southern Baptist causes. During its history, it did indeed return about $1.3 million to Baptist causes, but it also, quote unquote, loaned nearly $140 million to companies owned by three of the foundation's directors. In doing so, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona cost thousands of investors their life savings to the tune of $570 million. It was called the largest affinity fraud in history. And those numbers just kind of boggle my mind. Even 500,000 is a lot. I mean, when I hear of things of this scale, and especially with the Lord's money, that's unsettling.
Right.
And I'm presuming this does have some relation to your interest in small congregations, because it seems like when organizations get large, it can really attract bad players that you might not get in smaller churches. I don't know how. I'm just speculating here. So
yeah, well, my interest wasn't necessarily just for that, but the least resource among us in church and ministry is going to be that small church. If you've gone to any kind of a conference, an evangelism conference, a preaching conference, any kind of conference, the people you see on the platform are generally what you would call the elite pastors, the celebrity type pastor, the ones that have, multiple books out and, all these kind of things. You don't see the guy that's pastoring a church 100 and a guy who's been laboring, in ministry for 40 something years and is well educated, well read, works hard, has got a good grasp on the ministry that he's doing, and understanding his context. The reality is, the larger a church is, oftentimes the pastor understands less and less about the context of his people. And the reason is because the more and more people that come in, they're coming from a multitude of context. But if you're pastoring a open country rural church, for instance, and say there's 1,000 people in the immediate community, and your church has 120 on a Sunday morning, or 100 or 75, which is 175 to 100 or so is normative. About 80 to 85% of the churches in the United States, of all denominations, and he's laboring there. The majority of the people who are coming to his church have pretty similar context. They shop in the same pharmacy, they shop in the same grocery stores. Many of them have the same kind of work, whether it be industrial or whether it be farming or whatever it is. But when you get into these mega-sized churches, regardless of whether it's in an urban center or not, you've got people oftentimes that'll drive 35, 40, 50 minutes to come and be able to be a part of that because of oftentimes the draw of the celebrity preacher. And I'm not saying they're not, great preachers and oftentimes wonderful expositors and very challenging and engaging, but it's real easy to be a pew sitter in that kind of a church. And it's real easy to come on Sunday and not really do anything else, right? I mean, you come, you enjoy, you walk away. You're not being discipled. You're not being challenged. You're not being really encouraged through the week. You just live for Sunday. Okay. But in a small church, that's rarely possible, because if you live in the community, the guy you went to church with on Sunday may be somebody you run into at the local grocery store or at Walmart or wherever. Maybe just pass them on the road. And the reality is, you're probably going to see them in other places, not just in church. And because it is a smaller context, the pastor probably knows your name. Now, I'm not saying that every pastor needs to learn everybody's name to come into. That's a good thing if he can. I'm just saying the likelihood is much more in a small church. The larger a church gets, the structure changes, and who he invests his time changes. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. It's just a reality. There's no way he could do a church running 1,000 or 10,000 the same way relationally that a guy in a small church is. So most of the places I've served, because we were on mission in an area of Michigan where there were very few good evangelical and Southern Baptist churches, most of those churches were small. So,
if you'll forgive me, every now and then, if you see me looking here, it's my other computer. We got attacked by a spam bot. I had to dispose of him or her or it.
Spam bot heard I was here, huh?
Yeah, no disrespect intended. Yeah.
No, that's all right.
Now, I got you on really late, Bobby, because I'm such a night owl. I know that your bedtime might be rolling around, and I really appreciate you coming out late.
No, I'm a night owl too, so I'm good. If I doze off, you'll know it.
Okay. So I actually had some off the wall questions
Okay.
because given your background in planning churches and seeing, and you said conflict resolution.
Oh yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
never
I've done a lot
forget,
of
you
that.
said you said you're aware of one church where they split because of the color of the carpet. Can
Oh yeah.
you, is that, should I not have said that? Or is
No,
it,
no, 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 no. I don't think I told you, and I won't say now the name of any given church. The point of telling you that is churches sometimes with people that you feel uh, historically in your experience are extremely godly people, key leaders in the church, people who are known in the church as prayer warriors, elected leaders, maybe a deacon, something else. In the midst of conflict, uh, will do some of the most ungodly things. And I've often said the meanest people I know and I have ever known in all of my life were people in the church. And that's a sad commentary. But that's a sad commentary. But the meanest people I've ever worked with, and many of those have been in churches that were in conflict with people, because I'm in, or at least in Michigan, for those 16 years, I was in churches that were smaller. So I got to be friends with many of those leaders, not just the pastor, not just the deacon body, but I mean, just people sitting in the pew. I'd walk in because I was there 10 years. So I would walk in and they'd go, "Oh, Brother Bobby, how are you?" And they'd come up and they'd give me a hug or a high five or whatever. And the kids remembered me, you know, and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, I had relationships with these people. I took many of them on mission trips with me. We went mission trips all over that Midwest United States. And I would lead joint mission trips through the association. We'd have 4, 5, 6 churches with their members that would go with us. So I knew these people. And then something would happen in that church and people would be calling me from all sides and I'd end up in the middle of it. And it might be something as silly as, well, we wanted to have red carpet and we want to have blue carpet. It's like, really? That's worth splitting the body over? You know, tearing up the unity of the church. It could be something as simple as whether the pastor is going to sit on the platform or pastor sits on the front pew. In years gone by, it's not as much now, but in years gone by, what the pastor wore and what the pastor's wife wore was always a topic of conversation. I've known of pastors, it's been told to me, because remember, my dad was a pastor for many years and also an associational missionary. He's 89, almost 90 now. So he's been around a long time. But I remember him telling me of pastor friends he knew that they would get out in the midst of summer. Now he was in Georgia, so it's hot. They'd get out in the midst of summer and they would cut their grass in a pair of slacks, dress shoes, dress shirt, sleeves slightly rolled up, and a tie, because they did not want to be caught by a church member cutting the grass when they weren't ready for ministry. Now, of course, you and I look at that now and think, well, that's insane. You know, I'm wearing my shorts, you know, and I'm wearing my t-shirt or whatever. But you know, people's expectations of their pastor and staff make a huge difference. Just make a huge difference.
This is such cultural history. I mean, I find it fascinating just because I'm fascinated by human psychology, and you're a psychology student, and I think something you said kind of it resonates, and it's also disturbing. Some of the meanest people you meet have been in church. I can say that. Some of the meanest people that I've encountered, they nearly drove me out of the church. So, again, I don't want to touch on anything too sensitive, but there's this passage in here, Acts 20, and Paul is telling. I'll read it. It's always beautiful to read from God's word when we're talking about the church. And he said, hang on. Starting at verse 28. Pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers to take care of the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. and from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things, to draw away the disciples after them. Therefore be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. And the reason this verse strikes me is Paul had foreseen this. And, God had stop it. I went to Deuteronomy 13. It was kind of the same scenario. God says, if a prophet or dreamer, a dream arises among you and he tells you to follow after gods, don't listen.
Right.
God is testing to see if you love him with all your heart and all your soul. And so God, in the Old Testament, he's going to let the wolves come in because he's testing his flock to see if they'll love him with all their heart and all their soul. And that's kind of how I explain that passage in Acts 20, where Paul, for 3 years, knew this was going to happen. And you're like, well, Paul, why didn't you pray that it not? And God, why don't you answer that prayer and keep the wolves from coming in? So I thought, when I read that one passage in Baptist News about the North American Mission Board with $570 million, to me, that's wolves coming in. And not that I was making a point, but if you have any stories to share that would help, not just for the sake of gossip, but I mean, I have to tell you, this last year and a half has been just, if I did not have maybe a more solid faith, I think I'd just say I'm done with the church.
Right.
Because I would have thought this is all a sham to grab power and influence and money, just because of what I've been seeing. And I mean, I read that report. Okay, so let me extricate that, and we'll see what happens at McLean. But it was because of what was happening in McLean, I began to dig up what was happening at the Southern Baptist Convention. And I got to tell you, if I didn't feel God working in my life and giving me evidence that he's there, I would have said, I'm done. This is all a sham. So if you have anything to share with the flock here to encourage them, especially in light of Acts 20, share your heart, brother.
Well, let me start with a rough quote from my wife. I won't say it just like she says it. We've been through extreme difficulties, and much of what is now coming to light at the national level, especially related to the North American Mission Board, to NAM, and its leader, Kevin Ezell, are directly related back to us. And let me just say this, I'm going to give you her quote. You mentioned Will McRaney. And in fact, I'll send you the link. We did an interview with Will McRaney. It's about an hour and 20 minutes or so, but it was right after the Supreme Court decision against the North American Mission Board, because McRaney didn't take it to the Supreme Court. North American Mission Board was trying to prevent, they didn't want the truth to come out, which is the case. At this juncture, there's no evidence, no facts have been evaluated by a court about the case. That's been almost 5 years, because North American Mission Board keeps delaying. And one of their delay tactics was to petition the Supreme Court to hear an appeal they lost twice at the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court in New Orleans. So what happened to him, you can almost track much the same thing had happened to us 11 months earlier. And Will, apparently what was happening is they were practicing on me to be able to get at you. But Will is a sharp guy, and he did a much better job keeping up with records and a lot of other things. And so he has kind of been a big.
I'm sorry, your audio just froze a little bit at the juicy part. You're saying they're practicing. You're kind of the batting practice for Will McRaney. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what has happened to him, if you go back and learn the story, not just what you see right now, but learn kind of what the story was, then you kind of see what had happened with me. It's a little different, but both of us were trying to basically stand our ground related to church planting that was going on in our state, and trying to trying to advocate for, look, we've got a system going here. We understand our context. We know what we need to be doing. We just need you to come alongside and help us. We need to, as I used to say, they needed to be resource brokers, because, and I sidetracked a while ago. Remind me, I'm going to give you the quote from my wife. But in the denominational stack, church, local association, state convention, and then national, which is the North American Mission Board and the other entities. There are 12 entities, including 6 seminaries, and the executive committee. So, but everything starts with the local church. None of those other entities, tell the church what to do. So what had happened is the North American Mission Board had decided they wanted to take on kind of a national approach where they were in control of everything happening on the ground. They wanted to control the strategies. And that's a cookie cutter approach. There's no way they could tell, let me just say where we were in Michigan. I'm going to use my hand because everybody knows that's the Michigan map. But there's no way they could say that a church that started up here in Bad Axe was the same as a church started in Detroit or Ann Arbor or Traverse City or up in the Upper Peninsula, up in the Little Flag. Churches started in those areas are all going to be different because they're different kinds of people, different kinds of communities. So cookie cutter approach isn't going to work. And to be honest, what Will and I were saying then is being proven out now, because since that was, they started down that road, we now have probably about little under half of the number of churches started every year that the North American Mission Board is helping with than we did back in 2010. And the reality is they're spending 3 times as much money to try to plant those churches. So the numbers aren't really looking that good, at that point. But what Brenda has, go ahead. I'll just remind me. I got to quote in.
Get the quote in. Get the quote in.
I will. Her quote is that I am not going to let those people come between me and my relationship with Jesus. I am not going to let what those people have done come between me and my relationship with Jesus. And we have lost a significant amount. I'm not going to bellyache and all that stuff about what it is. It has, and it's been really hard. And we've suffered because of the things that have been said and done. And I particularly, not my wife, but I particularly have been sought out to take, out of positions and prevent me from getting further employment. That happened before coming to Atlanta. Kevin Ezel made a phone call to the guy in charge of the search team, and he just made the phone call and said, "You don't want to hire him." But everybody else that knew me, and they went ahead and called me to come to the church planning network where I was coming. But that shouldn't be the case, the way that's done. So there's a lot of things that have happened, but I think that's just a great thing for us to remember, that in spite of how bad things get in a church sometime, in spite of how difficult it is, whether it be locally, whether it be among churches, whether it be just among people in my own church, you can't let that come between you and your relationship with Jesus Christ.
Actually, before we go further, Pastor, could you just say a brief prayer for this message for us right now? I just felt led. I would appreciate, and the viewers listening live and by recording.
Sure, absolutely. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this opportunity to be able to come together and to be able to talk about your work and your kingdom. And Lord, we ask that it be a blessing to us. And Lord, I ask that you help us to be very sensitive to you as we do that. Just help us to be clear in what we say and just articulate that clearly. And then, Father, I pray that you help us to have open hearts to receive what is being said. Lord, speak to us uniquely, as we know you always do, through your Spirit. Amen.
Amen. All right. I have a Wikipedia entry on the North American Mission Board, which you just mentioned, and Kevin Ezel is the head of that. Is that correct?
He's the president, right? He's the president.
Okay, so let me just read this. See if here it is. North American Mission Board is the domestic missions agency of the Southern Baptist Convention. So they basically try to plant. They basically look at the United States as a mission field. Is that correct? And they're trying to plant. Okay, So,
Yeah, but let me clarify, because
okay, thank
trying
you.
to plant is not historic. The North American Mission Board was formed to basically replace what was called the Home Mission Board, and that happened back a number of years ago now. But it just came to a point where people said, "Look, it's not home and foreign." Our International Mission Board was called foreign. Well, we ought not to be calling people foreigners. Was kind of the idea. So uh, everything in North America is considered North American mission. So that's basically Canada and the US. And then anything beyond that, Canada, Central America, South America, the other continents, are all considered international missions as far as our two boards. We have two boards. And incidentally, I mentioned the association a while ago. The association has existed more than 300 years, which is long before any of the national entities have existed, any state conventions existed, or the SBC as a whole existed. So the association was the foundational structure, basically, where churches were cooperating together. But when the North American Mission Board was formed, it had multiple layers of things it was responsible for. And so it was involved in community ministry. When I was in Detroit, we had what was called the Hope Center. We reached out to homeless people there, people who were indigent in the Detroit area. They funded associational missionaries in new areas like that, like where I was. They funded collegiate ministry. No, I take that back. Not then. Lifeway was doing that. But there were collegiate activities that they were involved in. And they had the summer missions program, which was all about collegiate. State conventions worked with them, and they assigned missionaries all over. That's how I went as a missionary like that as a student. And so they had assignments of all kinds of different assignments of missionaries, all ultimately with the intent of reaching people for Christ. And in most cases, those conversions are going to be to gather people into a group of Bible believing believers, in a congregation. So, but you have to you have to evangelize to congregationalize, right? So you're going to evangelize those people in that area, and then you want to congregationalize them. When the Great Commission Resurgence was passed, narrowly for the most part, but when it was passed in Orlando in 2010, what ended up happening was those who were kind of in control at the top levels, they had Kevin elected. Kevin Ezell was elected. And when he was put in there, I think he defined his task better than anybody. In a podcast he did with Jimmy Scroggins, who is a pastor in Florida, he actually said this. He said, well, Jimmy was interviewing him, and he asked Kevin, he said, well, tell me about when you went to the North American Mission Board. And Kevin's response was, well, he said, to be honest, I had to go down there and just blow everything up so I could do what needed to be done. And he was cutting up and playing with his friend in the podcast, but that's exactly what he did. They went in and they defunded all the associational missionaries who they'd partnered with. They defunded evangelism, all the evangelism staff and people who were in evangelism. They defunded community ministry people. They defunded, and the list goes on and on, all the different kinds of ministries that we're a part of. Well, like Interfaith Witness, tremendous interfaith witness department that helped. There were specialists there that could help you in your church or your association in dealing with Mormons or dealing with, even a Catholic, another different denomination, or any other kind of you have the Baha'i. Man, I don't know how to reach a Baha'i person. What do I need to know? This department focused on that. There were like 20 people in there, had specialties. They had an evangelism department, had people who were specialists in doing event evangelism, doing servant evangelism, doing community evangelism, all these different things. They literally traveled across the country working with associations, state conventions, and local churches to help do that. When Ezell came in, they got rid of all that. Over a period of a couple of years, they defunded all of that because they said, we're only going to fund two things. We're going to fund church planting and church planting alone. So we will fund a church planter, or we will fund someone who is a church planter catalyst. And
wow. okay,
Yeah.
this is extremely relevant to my situation. But let me show the what I found on Wikipedia,
Mm-hmm.
and let me just share it here.
Yeah. See, you may have got me started. You know.
No, because all right, it helps to understand why I'm so. Why was I threatened with jail and arrest?
Right.
And this is giving me an insight. Why was I? I wasn't doing anything. I'm sorry to be just like whining. Why did they do that to me? And then a few months later, this lovely Christian young mother in front of her children, same treatment, but this time armed security, a bigger contingent of armed security confronted her. She was brought before the judge in Fairfax County. What was her crime? She was asking questions about church planning.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this to us? And I can only think this there is power. You said it was the three P's, power,
Um,
power,
power,
prestige,
prestige,
and
and wait. I've said that 100 times. I'll think of it in a second. Go ahead. Position. That's it. Power, position, and prestige. Yeah, that's it.
this is, I mean, people heard this and they're like, this is happening in a church. They're using church security to do this to a Christian mother in front of her children. That's just, and then she's dragged into court. And I'm
Right.
just like, I'm trying to understand why. And I have my suspicions now. And I think it is going to the three P's that you identified. But let me share this from Wikipedia about Kevin Ezell. This is a publicly contributed article. And there it is. They have Kevin Ezell. And in 2021, it reported an operating budget of $99 million. It's funded through a combination of Southern Baptist Cooperative Program and the Annie Armstrong offering. I mean, we're talking a lot of money here. $99 million for a church organization isn't anything to sneeze at. And I'm getting wind that Kevin Ezell is having influence over over McLean Bible Church. There's some connection there that we're suspecting.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it.
Because McLean Bible had planted 50 churches in like 4 years. And we don't know how many, I mean, these could be, for all we know, half of them are non-existent at this point. Many of them had congregations of 30. And look what happened to McLean Bible in this. This caused an upheaval in our church. And I'm just going to share with everyone. Look what happened to, you're talking about the negative influence of this change that happened in your area in Michigan. Look what happened to the church that North American Mission Board had an influence over. In the 4 years, okay, so the SBC started to get in there, but in just like 2 years, this is what happened. The solid line is the church's official report where they conflate the online with brick and mortar attendance. I went and started counting the actual brick and mortar attendance, and you could see just this drop. And so
well, and let me say this, Sal, just to interrupt. Again, there's a huge difference between this larger church, which McLean is. It's a large mega church, much larger than most. And the relationship that happens there between your pastor and Kevin Ezell is very significant because they have been good friends for a long time. When Platt was at the International Mission Board, they were working very across our convention. Some said that the plan was for Platt to get in there for only a short period of time or a matter of years, but still a short period of time, and that Ezell and Platt were going to try to merge the two boards together where there was only one mission board consolidating. You think the North American Mission Board has a lot of money. International Mission Board has a significant larger amount of money because 50%, over 50%, right at 51% of all of the cooperative program dollars that are given through churches, through state conventions to the national entity, 51% of every dollar goes to the International Mission Board. Barely 25%, 24 something, I think, goes to North American missions. So the significance of that is huge. And there became a lot of upheaval and whatever, and that kind of went away. And I don't have any idea if that had any play in Platt ultimately leaving. But what I was going to say is the North American Mission Board formed a strategy a number of years back now where they hired what they call ambassadors. And those ambassadors, there was a list of about 3,000 churches. These are the most influential churches in the entire Southern Baptist Convention. And remember what I said, our convention has about 50,000 churches. Okay. So they pulled out 3,000, the top givers, largest, whatever their criteria is. I don't know exactly what the criteria is, but if you're a big giver in a good sized church, you are on this list. And so each of these ambassadors were given a list of 20, 25, 30, whatever the number is of pastors. And their job was to keep the pastors that they had on their list happy. Okay. Provide them with resources, provide them with funds. We know of churches that are nowhere near the SEND, SEND, SEND cities, which is the strategy North American Mission Board has, that have had houses bought for a church. Quail Springs in Oklahoma City. Nearest Sin City is over 300 miles away. But the North American Mission Board bought 2 houses for Quail Springs to use, supposedly for church planting, but they didn't just have church planters there. Plus, if you're thinking strategically from a mission standpoint, you don't put a church planter in a house and say, well, he's going to live there for 2 years. We're going to move him out somewhere else, along with the people that he's reached in that community, put another planter in that same house to reach the same community and keep doing that. That doesn't make sense. But some of the houses that the North American Mission Board bought for churches, some in Sin City, some were not. I mean, some of them are $500,000. Some of them are $700,000. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money that was bought. House in Arizona, I'm on a tyrant, sorry, but a house in Arizona that they bought, it has a huge pool in the backyard. It's incredible. It looks gorgeous. Big house. And I don't remember how many thousand square feet it is, but it's huge. And it's like, dude, I've planted churches. I've lived on the mission field. You know what size the house was I lived in? Man, we lived in a house that was just barely 1,200 square foot, you know, and it was on a 1/4 acre property, you know.
I was, for your benefit in the audience, while you're talking, I'm trying to dig stuff up here on the net to share on the screen. But
well, I can give you some links that you can put down in your description if you want me to for later. Hard to get to all of it right now, I know, but right. There are a number of things I can send you.
So I'm very grateful for your time, because this is enlightening me. Because, I mean, not just for my, it's bad enough for myself, but when I never thought I'd see it in a Christian church, is kind of the threat of physical force against the Christian mother just because she asked questions. Right. That's just
and you saw that right in front of you. But things like
I wasn't there because I was already trespassed.
Well, but what I'm saying is that was in a church that somebody, you know, I mean, that's emotional, it's personal. And I think I may have told you, I mean, I've worked with churches that were having internal conflict when, you know, the local sheriff's department was called and they surrounded the church and said they couldn't go in the church to remove somebody, but they were waiting for as soon as he stepped outside on the outside property to remove him, because somebody else in the church had, you know, said that he had to be removed because they didn't like the stand he was taking, you know. I mean,
yeah, it happened.
It hits deep. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I thought I heard you said is there's a lot of money that goes to the International Missions Board. They identified the congregations that were involved, and basically North American Mission Board started to plant these, quote unquote, plant these churches there
Right.
and get these beautiful, expensive houses.
Well, not all, but there were. We were able to account for, and again, they've not been willing to reveal their finances. So
that's why this thing, with McCraney is a big deal, because it's going to come out if they get whoa.
Yeah, there needs to be what do they call it?
Transparency.
Well, yeah. But I was thinking the kind of financial report, investigate. Yeah, but there's a name for the kind of audit.
Forensic audit.
That's it. That's the one. I couldn't think of it.
I
went blank. But yeah, there needs to be a forensic audit just to clear it up, because what we know is, and I believe the number, it was either 62 or 69. It's been too long since I looked at it, but like $62 million that we were able to find and account for that they spent on houses. And like I said, some of them were in areas where churches were being planted, some of them not. Well, and there's a public list.
The figure came out.
Yeah, well, there's a public list of those houses, many of them that were found on the website reformnamb.now.org. So reformnamnow.org. And there's a page, I can't remember which page it's under, but there's a thing on abuse of power and misuse of finances, that kind of thing. And it's there. Yeah.
Oh, there are all sorts of things that can be done. For one, if it's NAMB property or who owns it, they're basically running a big real estate hedge fund.
Yeah.
And you can wield a lot of power when you're controlling assets of that magnitude. And I just got this here, the International Missions Board budget, $255 million. I don't know if that's annual, but I presume it is.
Wow.
$255 million is a lot of money. And I'll point out, the head of the International Missions Board used to be David Platt, who's now at McLean.
Right.
And I'm sorry to rub this in, guys, but this is the effect that that David Platt has had on our church since he arrived. I shouldn't laugh, but Bobby, you're still there?
Yeah, I'm here. My mic. I just turned the camera off a second.
Alrighty. So I was just, let me just put that graphic up again until you get back. So, David Platt has been saying, let's go reach out the world with the gospel. We got to do everything we can to reach the world with the gospel. And I've said, well, if you can't manage your own house, God help us if you're going to try to spread what you did in McLean to the rest of the world. And it seems that a lot of money that was going to the ministries in McLean, what you were saying about how they're canceling all the specialists that they were having, that they had until Kevin Ezell came, exactly what happened. The same playbook at McLean. They destroyed a lot of ministries, even some that didn't even ask money. Like I was in the apologetics ministry, 15 years. 0 money was ever asked. We got eliminated. They eliminated all sorts of ministries. They had a clothing ministry, and there was a lot of money funneled to make all these church plants that we have. There's no accountability, and we don't know if houses were bought using congregational money, and we don't know who basically got paid off. I'm sorry to say.
Right. Yeah.
And there's all these kind of under the table arrangements like gift cards or whatever that you just, so when you're saying all this accounting and see, now this is starting to make sense.
Well, and it's that same strategy. It's the old thing when somebody says, when somebody's working for you, they don't ask you, it's the leader asks, or whatever you want to call them. I call them a leader, but if a leader asks you to jump, you don't ask any questions except how high, or jump off where, and it's that kind of authoritative kind of leadership, if you want to call it that, or administration. It's just like, year and a half ago, maybe, I can't remember the exact time frame. But Randy Adams, who is one of the state executive directors for the Northwest and Oregon and Washington states, and he had been speaking out boldly against Ezel and what was going on and what was happening, with NAM. And I can't remember exactly what had happened, but something had taken place, and he had, just spoken out. And within just over a week, a large number of the church planters in the Northwest, in that convention area, received a check for, I think it was $1,000 or $1,500, just out of the blue. And it just said, it's just a gift, just a gift. And so a couple of the planters called him. He's got a great relationship with his church planters, even though he's at the state level and not the local association. So they called and said, what's this for? Well, then he started exploring and found out it was just a gift, just off the cuff. And the obvious tie was, they're trying to buy their loyalty. They want the loyalty to be with them, the North American Mission Board, and not on a local level. They want it all connected. And I can give you another illustration from when I was in Michigan. When I was in Michigan and they started this gift card thing, you mentioned the gift card. Now you've opened up a can of worms. But when they first said they were going to do that, I can remember sitting in my vehicle in the parking lot outside the state convention. And it's probably good I was sitting in my own car by myself, because I was furious. I'd gotten word they were going to do this. And so I talked to a couple of people, vice president and others, but I finally got to the guy who was actually the one responsible doing it from direct authority of Ezel. He worked directly under Ezel. And I said to him, why are you sending them gift cards? Now, understand, I am not standing against helping church planters. Within the last few years, we had a church plant starting in my community. We hosted Bible studies in my home. We put gas in that guy's car. We'd top off his tank just to, as an expression of love. We'd take him out to meals. We'd help him at different times, because we're right there. We're building a relationship, and he has an issue or a problem. He comes to us because he knows that, and he knows we're there to help him. Now, we weren't just like an open pocketbook here, just whatever you want. There were very strict parameters, but oftentimes myself personally, or a pastor personally, like, Pastor Bert, he would do this, just say, hey, look, I'm going to, a bunch of pastors go out to eat. Church planter never paid when all of us went out to eat as a group, because one of the pastors or myself would pick up his meal. Now, was that necessary? Did it happen? No. But it's just say, hey, look, we appreciate what you're doing, the sacrifices you're making. Well, I called and told him, I said, look, we already do that kind of thing. And if y'all want to start doing that, I think that's great. It's super, but we're already your partners. And why don't you send those gift cards to us? We already have church planting catalysts. We already have associational missionaries. Their job is to be connecting with these church planters. Why don't you send those gift cards to us? We'll give the gift card for whoever you want it to go to, John, Bill, whoever, and give it to that catalyst or whoever, and let him go, take him out to eat, take he and his wife out to eat, whatever, and give him a big hug around the neck, say, buddy, we love you. We're beside you. We're praying with you, and North American Mission Board has just a little gift just to say they appreciate you too. And we're just delivering that to you. We just want you to know we all care for you. Okay. Now, which makes the biggest impact? Sitting across the table and loving on a guy and his wife and saying, look, this is from all of us because we care for you, or, in a little envelope, being mailed, take a little card like this, stick it in an envelope, mail it to them, and they get a $100 gift card. And you know what I was told? Absolutely not. Under no circumstances will we do that. And I said, you do understand what you are saying to all of these thousands of missionaries that are appointed out across this country. You are saying, we do not trust you. We don't trust you. If we sent you the gift cards, we don't trust you would take it to them and say it came from us. We want to make sure we get the credit. We want to make sure we are recognized. We want to make sure it's about us and they have a sense of loyalty to us because we've helped them.
Well, And
Go
at
ahead.
McLean Bible, this Christian mother and others have been saying, well, it appears now that the North American Mission Board had used congregational money to buy loyalty. It would be done in the name of NAMB when it really was done with McLean Bible money. And we have been demanding financial transparency. We want accountability. And when we ask these questions, we get barred from church. And I don't know what legal action has to be taken to open up the books, but something, we have a number of accountants that have looked at the financial reports. They said, this is not a financial report. It's designed to conceal. It's not. Yeah. And we can just smell a skunk. And right. As I pointed out, and I'm going to just point it out, and I pointed this out already publicly, McLean Bible is reporting the same year-over-year revenues despite this drastic drop. Mm. How are they pulling this off? So right. There are just all these suspicions, and I could see now it's starting to make sense. There's a story here that's unclear, but it doesn't look wholesome. And maybe that Sunday I got pulled out of the church in the middle of the service because they knew I was counting the number of people in the sanctuary. Right. I think I was getting a little too near. And some people speculated that David Platt doesn't want Kevin Ezell to know how bad things are going. And I might have actually blown the whistle.
Well, but you have to understand that's the strategy at all levels. At Lifeway, and this has been well over a year ago now, but at Lifeway, the former CEO, Tom Rayner, when he left, his buddy, Jimmy Scroggins, that name comes up again, but Jimmy Scroggins was the chairman of the board of trustees for Lifeway. And he had a couple of books in the works to come out as the chairman of the board. And we won't comment about that at this point. But when Rayner resigned, he basically resigned, was kind of retiring, but he went and left there to go to his own business called Church Answers. And when he did, Scroggins approved for him to receive a $1 million check, basically severance check, on top of a number of other things. It's all documented in articles and stuff, but that was the big thing, the $1 million. And none of the board of trustees knew about it. None of the executive team of the board of trustees knew about it. Only the, I don't know if it's the CFO exactly, but it was the one person who had to write and sign the check. But it's for $1 million. Well, once this was discovered some months later, people were like, what did he do? In the time he's been there, Lifeway has gone downhill. They've now closed all of their Lifeway stores that were all across the country. They've shifted all kinds of other things. They've reallocated money. They sold their building because they couldn't afford it anymore and went into a smaller building. I mean, there's just one thing after another. And Rayner's a nice guy. I know Tom. And he is a nice guy. But the evidence of some of those things that were happening were not on the plus side of the balance sheet. And why did he feel like he could do that? Well, he felt like he could do it because he could get away with it. And it just happened to be somehow somebody found out about it and revealed it. And now it came out. Well, he's ultimately had to return the money, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a culture in that kind of leadership. And I'm not saying it's just because you're at that level. I think power is intoxicating. Without any question, power is intoxicating. So when you get to that level, it is easy to get the poison. Okay. But just because you're there doesn't mean you have to be poisoned. Okay. But in these particular situations, many of them have been intoxicated by that. They've learned how to play the game. They've learned how to smile, shake hands, grip and grin, as I used to say as a photographer for posing pictures, grip and grin. But they've learned how to do all that. While all the while behind the scenes, they understand how they can get away with things. So things can be moved, things can be manipulated in ways that other people don't know about it. Well, the problem with that is that just like you said at McLean, the financial report is not really a financial report. It's just not really a financial report. It gives some basics, but we really need to see more than that. And I've seen it in small churches too. I've never been one that felt like every check that was written and every penny that was spent, and because the reality is, especially if you're in a working class culture, a blue collar kind of a culture, a lot of times there's suspicion of any kind of management. That's just the nature of a union kind of a culture. And those folks, and not good or bad, but they're very suspicious. And so if they start looking at every check, there'll be like a guy in one of my congregations. He stood up in a business meeting because our treasurer wanted to do that. He stood up in a business meeting and opposed a $14 bulletin board, just a cork bulletin board. And I thought, really? You're going to oppose a $14 bulletin? I mean, here's a church. I mean, we're running 250. It's not like McLean, but I mean, it's a good sized church, got a pretty good sized budget, and he's fussing over $14. Well, it sat quiet for a second. Then little Miss Marie stood up. Miss Marie was in her early 80s, maybe late 70s. And everybody's quiet because Miss Marie was very quiet and never said anything to anybody. And I mean, except personally, never public. But she stood up and she looked around at this young guy. He was in his 40s. She looked around at him and she said, brother, and I'm not going to call his name, but said, I asked our pastor if he would buy me that cork board to put in our prayer room. So we had a place to tack encouraging poems and notes while we're in the prayer room praying. And our folks who volunteered to come to the prayer room wanted to have some place to do that because they didn't want to stick it in the wall. But he got quiet. He sat down, no other discussion. But it's that mentality of wanting to know every little penny spent. So I'm not for that, but you need to have a system in place where you've got a finance team or a finance committee. You've got you don't just have a couple of pastors. You don't have just, even in the biggest church, you've got to do that. And especially in a larger church, you need to have an external audit every couple of years. You just do, because you're dealing with so much money, and maybe an internal audit the alternate years, but before you hand over to a new treasurer, there needs to be an audit done, all these kind of things. So there needs to be all those checks and balances. And then that finance team can report back to the church. They can say back to the church, we have explored this. We have checked. We had some concerns about spending in this category, and we saw so-and-so, but we've taken care of that now. Whatever the issues are, they can handle it. But you have to have that trust level. You can't have just top level leaders in a large religious or any other kind of organization that have that kind of ultimate power. And that's what you're seeing at the North American Mission Board, that feel they don't want to be transparent. They don't want you to see how that $92 million in church planning line was spent. They just give you a budget and it says $92 million were spent, or whatever the number is last year.
99.
There we go. But they don't break down how much of that was spent funding planters and how many planters and where those planters are. They don't break down how much of that was spent on houses. They don't break down how much of that was spent on gift cards, how much, or what it was spent on. I don't have a problem spending $99 million on church planting. I don't have a problem with that. I want to know that it's well spent. And right now, for the number of church plants we're having in Southern Baptist work, they're spending 3 times as much money as ever in history for planting those churches. Okay, I'll be quiet. I'm sorry, you got me going.
Well, we're going to change the subject a little bit because perhaps we'll have this conversation again in a year or so.
Sure. Oh, and I love Sandy's comment, though. Yes, Sandy
he
wants to sign up for that.
Sandy, yeah. By the way, he tried.
Yeah, I've seen Sandy. He was on the previous ones I've watched with you. So hello,
okay,
Sandy. Yeah, Sandy's never met me, but hello, Sandy.
he knows of you, Sandy.
Yeah.
Now I saw this thing before. You've given me a lot of insight because, I mean, I've sort of heard it from people here, but hearing it from you out there in Michigan, my jaw was dropping out. This sounds eerily familiar with what's going on at McLean. By the way, our annual budget's $25 million.
Yeah, see, it's huge. Yeah.
And I got to point out, when I did the numbers, I said with the brick and mortar numbers, number of people there, every couple, so every individual would have to be contributing 10,000. Every couple would be 20,000. I'm just like, that does
Wow.
seem a little stiff. I don't believe
Yeah.
the numbers. Where's it
Right.
coming from?
Right.
And we're speculating that it's Kevin Ezel.
Well, most
So that's a big gift card.
there is funding probably, and some of that's run through relational lines and other things. But the problem is, unless you've gotten it from there, on the North American Mission Board side, nobody can find out. Even the state executive directors. Remember I told you about Randy Adams? He's asked point blank. He has asked, we would like to see how many churches in my state convention. He's not asking all across the country. In my state convention. In my state convention, which church planters are you sending funds to? And see, let me just say this. This will it'll lend further credence, like you need any, but it'll lend further credence to how things have shifted. When I first went to Michigan, 2001, I went to work with church planting and associational missions, church revitalization. Okay. The checks that went to a church planter didn't come through me, but they were sent to the state convention. Okay. And so the state convention, then they would take that. Obviously, they keep accounting of it, but the money would come in, and it was what I think accountants call a pass-through account, kind of a pass-through. But it's because in our case, the North American Mission Board was giving 85% to that church planter, and our state convention was giving 15%. It's a shared partnership. Other states were different. Some of them were as high as 50-50 or something, but each state was different. Okay. But it went through the state convention. The state convention added their 15%, and then that check was sent to the church planter. Now, I got a report as an associational missionary. Money's not coming through me, but every month I got a report that showed exactly how much money had come in for the church planters in my associational region and how much had gone out. Okay. So everybody's informed. That system had its failures, it had its problems, it had its issues, but everybody knew. Since the North American Mission Board has done what it did after the GCR, the Great Commission Resurgence, they now eliminated any of that money coming to the state convention. And so now a state convention has no idea what church planter in their area is receiving how much at all, which is a real problem, because as an associational missionary working with my church planters, I could have a honest conversation with Bill or Jim or Alan or whoever his name was and say, look, I know that you're receiving $1,000 a month through North American Mission Board and our state convention. Our association is partnering with you $200 a month, toward your support. You've got two churches. They're giving $500 a month each toward your support. This is fading out here. This is, it's a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, whatever. And it's going. So I'm wanting to help you stay ahead to make sure you have the support to keep doing what you need to do. Right. And I'm the guy that can help keep them accountable. I mean, I wasn't required to in that sense, but I could, because I love those guys and I wanted to help them. Right. But what NAM's done now is they cut everybody else out. So only they know. And even when a state convention or association now asks them for who are the planters receiving money, how much are they receiving in my area, they won't tell them. So Randy, in his Northwest Baptist Convention, he doesn't know that Bill over there is getting this amount of money, but in the area he lives, he really needs to be able to get some more support above that or beyond that. And he can help, but there's no way he can know that, because North American Mission Board won't be transparent at all. And they've moved that since 2010. It's all changed. So
now, I'm going to take Sandy's question, and then I'm going to just shift topics. I just Googled this randomly. This NAMB whistleblower.
Oh, I saw that pop up this last week. Yeah.
I mean, I Googled financial corruption, NAMB. We've got a lot of specialists that are just upset with what's going on. So before we move on, when did they cease pass-through accounts? That would at least have had some accountability. We need time for our timeline. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. It started happening there in 2010. It didn't all go away till probably 2014 before they made the full conversion.
Sandy, I know you dropped in a little later. The earlier part of this interview is pretty good, and I'm just going to have to switch the topic because as juicy as there's lots of material now that you've told me where I can get it. I don't have to press you for it, and I love it when you're riled up, Pastor Bobby.
Sorry.
I call you that because you really helped me this summer. You know, I have my local church group from McLean, the McLean Exiles, I call them.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see people from around the country showing their support.
Well, you're a friend.
So, Pastor Jim, Pastor Bert, thank you also. So I had a list of off the topic questions, but
Okay.
they are sort of related to what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
I said I could have been easily disillusioned if God didn't work in my life to keep me in the faith.
Right.
Because I could have, you know, I can imagine Salvador Cordova 40 years ago. If this happened, I think I'd have said goodbye. This is all a sham. So I had to ask, since you're a pastor, I'm just going to ask you point blank, have you witnessed miracles or answered prayers as your time of pastor? Has that helped your faith or helped? I mean, have you seen it happen in congregations that it's held them together, that God would do something in people's lives, or at least have you heard testimonies of them?
Yeah. In the sense of what some groups talk about, miracles, the faith healers, all that. We're not going to get into all that, but I don't put myself in a place where I want to see any of that. I don't think most of that is that type of gifting is not really active today. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's one of those things can be argued for a long time. But I've never been around that kind of thing. But I have had people, in our church that there have been miraculous recoveries in the sense of have been diagnosed with a cancer or something else. And, people just went to praying and God's hand was moved, and their life was spared, for many, many more years in some cases. I guess one really poignant, anybody who's a parent for any length of time can recount situations with their kids, at times when they go, oh, my soul, that could have been a lot worse. God's hand was protecting, my 27-year-old, he's a mechanical engineer for a aeronautics type company. I can't tell you what it's called. What he does exactly at all. It's called Mesodyne is the company, but it's a startup company out of MIT, if that tells you anything. But he was working on a wood lathe about 2 weeks ago, and that thing slightly slipped and about took off his middle finger. But they told him when they got to the hospital, started working on it, if it had been just the slightest bit over, he'd have lost the finger. But as it turned out, he's getting his motion back in the finger. He's starting to get feeling back in the finger, those kind of things. So, that kind of thing as a parent, you look at it and go, the kid may not see it as a parent. He may not see it as a miracle. He may just say, well, I was just lucky or whatever. As a faith person, I'm not a luck person. I don't think those two coexist. Luck is not something that a faith person really has. I try to avoid even saying, oh, I was lucky, try something else. But probably one of the most significant things was after I was forced out at Michigan as the executive director. It was about 2 years in there, almost 2 years. Well, just short a month, being 2 years before I accepted this call to come to Atlanta and be the church planting catalyst, the lead catalyst for this church planting network, Lead Atlanta or Plant Atlanta here in Atlanta at the time. But during that time, I was driving for Uber and trying to do odds and ends. I was speaking some, I was preaching in some churches, that kind of thing. But, big churches are a little bit different. I'd preach in a big church sometime. You might get a $350 honorarium. It's not enough to feed a family for a month, but you might. But there wasn't but one church they ran about 700. And that was the only church I had that ran over about 150 in my whole region. So the churches I was preaching in were typically churches that had 18, 20, 30, 35 people. And those honorariums run from 0 to 25, 35, maybe 50. So all that to say, I wasn't making a lot of money. But what happened that was so miraculous was in that 23 months, we never missed a bill. We never were late on a payment. Just tons of things. And, during that time, we had a car totally give up the ghost, my youngest son's car. And somebody said, well, here. And they just gave us a couple of $1,000s to go buy a car for him. And, those kind of things to us were pretty miraculous. I'm a pretty self-sufficient kind of guy. I'm been a hard worker, all that kind of stuff. My wife is very, both of us strong work ethic, kind of a thing. And this is almost dehumanizing. I'm having to go stand in the line to try to get food stamps, and all that kind of stuff, trying to provide for my family, trying to get health care, the whole thing through the government, going to a food bank, to get food because we don't have enough food to feed the family. But you know what? God still provided. And I'll tell you this kind of an interesting thing to wrap that up. But right before we left, the church we were members of was Fellowship Baptist Church in Saline, which is right outside of Ann Arbor. And one of the last Sundays we were there, we went and asked the pastor and said, Pastor, can we take some stones out of the flower bed in front of the church? Or the entryway to the church off the parking lot. And they just had kind of like, flower beds, but they had those kind of pebble stones, not the little tiny ones like you see in Arizona and New Mexico, but, just the little small rounded stones that are decorative. And he said, sure. And he said, why? And I said, because we want to go get 23 of them and we're going to put them together to form like kind of an altar. Now, not an altar like you think of, back in biblical times necessarily, but I was and my wife were inspired by the story of Joshua, that after they won, after the fall of Jericho and after Achan had his sin and all that stuff that happened, and then they finally won, after that, and they defeated. Well, the scripture says that they built an altar out of stone, uncut stone, so they could remember. This was a place they could come back to and remember the tremendous works of God. So we gathered those 23 stones to be able to put together in some way to say, every time we see that little pile of stones, it's going to remind us of the powerful work of God, how he took care of us in our mind, very miraculous ways. And brought us through up until this time now where I've got new employment. My wife eventually got employment and that kind of thing. So yeah, we've seen that kind of thing, which has been real, it's hard because you're going through a really tough time. But when you reflect back and you go, man, God was really good. So,
well, I got to tell, brother, what you just said, like driving Uber and stuff, it's really hitting home because my situation.
Yeah.
To save my relationship with Dr. Sanford, I said, we have a lot of friction. We're getting a little bit of friction because I was a paid employee. And I said, why don't we just keep working? You don't pay me anymore. Everything got better, but then I was out of a job. But my mother and I are eternally grateful for what he did. And so the friendship was way more than any income.
Yeah.
I want him as my friend for the rest of my life.
Sure.
And so I had done delivery driving. I actually applied for a job at Taco Bell, because like my former employee, the MITRE Corporation, I had a great salary there, but now they're doing a lot of education on pronouns. I said, I don't know how long I'm going to last in an environment like that. And so, but the Lord has been taking care of me in other ways. I'm starting a small business, a couple small businesses now, and they're sustaining me. So what you just said has really moved my heart, because when you're saying, it feels demeaning, and and it's been very humbling. It's like, well, I have all these qualifications. Look what all
Right.
I've done in my life. And I'm just like, well, no, that doesn't, when God says, I want you to walk humbly before before the Lord. And it's like, well, whether I like to or not, I am now, especially this last year. And but what someone told me, he said, Sal, if that's what God has for you, you do it with all your heart,
Right. Yep.
no
And
matter
and
what
that's
you're doing.
hard. Yeah, it's hard sometimes, because you've seen other things, but if God's still providing for you, you have to try to be grateful, um, regardless. And it's just it's a blessing to see how God's worked. And our time since having been in Atlanta has not been without issue. I mean, there've been all kinds of things that have happened, especially when COVID hit. My wife and I both. And so all of a sudden, here we sit, and neither one of us now. I have my own small ministry, the Dynamic Church Ministries, and that small ministry has provided through a few different things, as far as some income and doing some consultation and some of those kind of things. But that wasn't my focus for a long time, for my main years. So most of my consultation was directly related to I'm employed, in the state convention or the association. And so I'm consulting and working with all these churches. And then in addition to that, I'd started the business back in 2006 in Michigan. But I'm still able to provide lots of resources and counsel. And like with you, I've never sent you a bill, but they're guys that, that contact me for various things that they need assistance with, or their church needs help with, or whatever. And I'm able to work with them. And so and interestingly enough, even though that's not, a 5-day, 40-hour a week kind of job, anything at all like that, it's interesting. God has just provided at the right time. It's like, I led a weekend Sunday school conference and spoke on Sunday twice for a church in Alabama. I'd known the guy for some years, but for a church in Alabama, figured the typical kind of a thing, $400 or $500, for speaking a couple of times on the weekend or something. And before all was said and done, they gave me, I don't remember exactly what it was, is over $1,500 in honorarium. But then they paid all of my mileage, on my vehicle to drive there and drive back, which,
Praise the Lord.
was 52 cents a mile or whatever it was. I don't remember. But that covered the cost of my vehicle and a little extra. And it was like, dude, we were at a point we really needed some income at that point. And so, you just have to trust the Lord and just have faith and just not be a worrywart. I try real hard just not to be a worrywart.
Well, I got to tell you, Pastor, I hope you don't mind me calling you that. It's just, I want to say thank you so much for your encouragement, because I'm going through a time now. It's just like so hard to trust anyone.
Right. Oh,
in
no,
the
I get
Christian
that.
faith.
No, I
And
get, and it's what I said earlier. The meanest people you ever met are in the church. Well, and that's why it's so hard to trust, because when a friend in the church, a fellow Christian, a pastor, a staff member in your church, whatever, has betrayed you, has lied about you, has gone against you, whatever, it's real easy to get bitter instead of better. And it's easy to dig into that. And I get that. I mean, I don't tell many people, but I mean, I've suffered severe depression at times since all this stuff happened in Michigan. And, it's just like, okay, we're going to go to a counselor. We're going to start talking this thing out. And is that something to be ashamed of? Absolutely not. But the reality is, when you have had that kind of hurt, that hurt is deep. And sometimes it just keeps getting deeper. And then things happen that throw salt in the wound. And you just have to step back. You just have to step back and try to, like my wife says, I'm just not going to let those people get in the way of my relationship with Jesus. And that's hard, but that's what we have to do. So I'm glad it's been an encouragement to you. Absolutely.
oh, yeah. Sorry, Fran.
No, that's all right.
I tear up really easily. That's just kind of the physiological thing, the way I'm wired.
Well, you're
My
sensitive, and that's
understanding,
good. Yep.
my best understanding is that whatever gave me my intelligence also kind of made me really sensitive. My nervous system basically overdeveloped. So that's why I have very strong I just tear up easily.
Yeah.
So I had this last question for you
Okay.
off the wall. We were talking about miracles, and I will um, um, just to relate a little bit. A pastor prayed for my mom when they said she'd never walk again. We were in an accident with a drunk driver.
Yeah.
That afternoon, she got movement in her leg. She eventually walked again. And there've been a lot of answered prayers.
Oh, that's exciting.
And
Yeah.
I think there has been even um, I felt spiritual oppression. I mean, I'd actually had a vision once, and I don't know what it was. I was involved in the paranormal as a teenager, and there was a lot of paranormal practice in our family, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we read the Bible and were close to God, a lot of that lifted. I mean, there's just some creepy stuff that just. So, I just wanted to say, any accounts of exorcisms among your congregants who said, because I come from a background like yours. I'm not Pentecostal or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that, but one of my favorite creationist work is Alien Intrusion, where it connects UFOs to actually be demonic phenomenon. And I just wanted to say, because Christianity has been so much in the United States, I mean, for a long time, we don't hear accounts of that. And I just
Right.
well, it went away probably because we were Christianized. But kind of in the pagan countries that are, the pockets of it, you hear accounts of this. So I was just curious, if you didn't have any incidents like that in your church, that's okay, because that means this, the demons are running from your congregations. That's a good thing.
Well, I think the manifestation of demons present with individuals or within a church doesn't have to manifest itself in such a way that you would think of an exorcist. But again, I have known some church people that I'm thinking, I wished I had the power, so I wished I knew what to do here, if I could exorcise some demons. But demons are very real. And some people want to, just play that off like that's nothing, but demons are very real. Angels are very real. These are creatures that are very, very real. And there's a limitation as to what a demon can do, and there's a limitation of what a demon can know. Satan isn't all knowing. I mean, people sometimes they have this misperception that Satan is omnipresent. Satan's not omnipresent. God is omnipresent. God knows everything, but Satan's not. I mean, Satan was thrown out of heaven, and he never had the ability to know everything about everyone, and never has. So there are isolated situations, and there are times that we even open the door through our own sin, through our own failure, through our own whatever, where I think there's no question that there's some demonic intrusion. And there are people who get into things in the world. You mentioned overseas. Some of the mission work that we did as a younger child, we were in Central America, in Guatemala and Costa Rica when I was a baby, but in Guatemala. But then as an adult, I've gone back to Myanmar. And so I think about Myanmar, and I was over there helping to train church planters and some Bible training, discipleship kind of stuff. And the stories that we heard from some of those young people, because most of them were in their late teens and early 20s, and they were there learning scripture, learning about discipling, and learning about how they could go back to their villages to plant a church. They weren't going to be sent off somewhere else. They were going back home to plant a church. And the stories they could tell about things that you would see and go, okay, yeah, that's demonic possession. And so there are places that have kind of cultivated that. And I'm not sure, you say you don't hear as much of it now in the U.S. because we're Christianized. I think our founding fathers, without question, were, they were deists, at the very least. And so our founding as a country was on the moral foundation, without any question, the moral thread of Christianity. And we have been far more, quote unquote, Christian as a country, as far as behavior and actions, than what we probably are now as a whole. At least what we know, social media has made that worse, I guess.
Yes.
Without a doubt. But I think there is such a thing as demons and demonic possession, and there are places probably in this country that you and I have just not been exposed to at that point. But I will tell you, let me give you this little aside. I've got a couple of friends from seminary, and actually the young lady was in my college in Oklahoma and met this guy at seminary, and they got married, ended up church planting, I think they're in Missouri now, had been there for some time, planted a church there after they planted one in Texas, right outside of Dallas. And they had been in Portugal, and they had a couple of children by that time. And they had come back to the United States on what we now call like stateside assignment, but like a furlough or something. But Southern Baptists missionaries don't have to come back and raise funds, because that's all provided through our cooperative program. Our churches all give to the cooperative. That helps fund the missionaries. So, but they are available to go speak. And so I found out that they were back in the States, and they were down in Texas, and she had family in Oklahoma. And so I made contact with them and said, look, I'd like for you to come speak in our church. And so I gave them basically the whole Sunday, and they spoke in Sunday school, and she sang and played piano. Their kids sang, and he preached, that kind of thing on Sunday morning. That afternoon we came together and we ate an authentic meal from Portugal. They helped our people. They gathered all the recipe things and put all the stuff together. And the woman, her name is Lygia, and Lygia helped them make that. And then we all sat around the tables and ate this authentic it's not Portuguese, I don't guess, Portugalian. What is that? I don't know. But anyway, a meal from Portugal. And then they shared and, just told stories, showed some slides of Portugal and all their mission work, that kind of thing. But that night they told us a story that they were debating on if they were going to go back to Portugal, and they love the Portuguese people. I mean, they had been there a little over 4 years before they came back, and they really wanted to go back. It had become their home. But their son, and I can't remember, I think it was their oldest son, but their son had literally an encounter with a demon. And he was with friends, and they were all together. They were with a group, but they were in an area that they probably shouldn't have been. But all kinds of just really weird things started happening. And Ken and Lygia, the parents, neither one really gave too much credence to anything like this for a while. But they ended up finding some people there after hearing his story, hearing what had happened, describing it. They identified it as something they had seen as demonic presence, not possession per se, but demonic presence that had scared this kid to death. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't function. And they ended up coming back off the mission field to be able to get help and support here in the United States. And they ended up not going back because they just felt like they couldn't expose him again to that, because it had been so horrible. And he's a Christian young man now. He's an adult now. But there are places and times where things like that do happen, without a doubt.
Well, it says, put on the full armor of God. We wrestle not against flesh and blood.
Yeah.
And and I'm in the sciences, and people are just like, Sal, you believe in that? And just like, well, I've seen enough.
Yeah.
So, because I've heard of people that have been encountering like that, and they pray in the name of Jesus, and when it rebukes the spirit, that has led to some conversions. And the reason I'm putting this on the table is we've talked about all the shenanigans going on in the churches. Why is it that some people persist after all that? And all I could say is, like, for myself and others, we believe Jesus has done something in our life. It could be maybe not overt or miraculous, but they know that their hearts changed. They're just not the same person. that's very common.
Right.
Their life gets cleaned up, and we don't know. And Dr. Sandy Pigeon's here. I actually shared his story here, and you heard it. He was in a bad spot, and he came to McLean Bible, and he heard a sermon on Hezekiah's tunnels, and that you would not think that passage would lead to someone's salvation, but it did.
Right. Yeah.
And he went off this. He got a degree from a Bible college, got a doctorate in seminary, and so anyway, I look forward to our next conversation. You've been such an encouragement to me and over the summer, and I hope to the viewers. I'm really sorry we have to even end this talk, but God willing, this isn't goodbye. And I've been immensely blessed. In fact, I'm almost an hour late for my next talk. I'm going to do molecular. Oh yeah. So guys, if you're waiting for my talk on the aloof flip-ons and zDNA, I'm just delayed by an hour. I'm gonna start it shortly on this channel. So I'm going to say goodbye to Bobby here. Could you close us? And I'd be honored if you would close our meeting in prayer and pray for the viewers who might be listening.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're not keeping me over for the next hour. My thesis was on developing a church planting strategy. So I would not be qualified. I don't even understand most of what your title was. So, oh goodness. Well, it's been good to be with you, Sal, and all your viewers as well. So let me just wrap us up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for our time of fellowship tonight. We thank you for the encouragement that we have received. And Father, even though we've talked about some concerning things, some concerning issues, we do hand those over to you. And we realize that many of us are just out of the ability to actually touch or control or influence much of that's going on. But Father, I pray that you do help us to stay well informed. And Father, we pray that you bring to light the things that need to be brought to light, because we know that the darkness cannot exist when the light shines. And that's going to come through transparency, both at McLean Church, as they're struggling with issues there, at the North American Mission Board, and in the thousands and thousands of other churches and Christian organizations across our country and around the world. Father, we ask that you be with Sal tonight. Just ask that you continue to be with him in his spiritual journey, and those that are watching tonight as well. Father, we ask that you be with them even in this next hour as they continue to challenge their mind and the things that bring them together, the common things that they love and want to explore and dialogue about. Father, we ask all these things in the most precious name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, Sal.
Yes, I'm going to end this broadcast. I'll meet you backstage for just a minute after I
that's
end
fine.
this.
That's great. Talk to you later.
Take care. God bless everybody.